It was a random day. My family and I had a road trip planned to go somewhere far from home. Just to go to a place in the Philippines called Dahilayan Bukidnon Park. While on the way, we used a GPS tracker to reach our destination. None of us were aware that the GPS may not be accurate. We followed the route. My uncle was driving the car. It was a fortune car, big enough to fit many people inside. As we got somewhere, it was still sunset, and we were going up a hill surrounded by tall trees. I fell asleep for a while because I was already exhausted from all the journey we went through, but I soon woke up from my mother's voice saying, "Dongpag Bante, Kimal Hologta." It's in Cebuano. It meant be careful, we're gonna fall off. I looked around the car window. We were on top of a hill. The sides of the road are so thin and tight. One wrong turn and we would all come crashing down. My cousins and I were at the back of the car. We stayed quiet because we knew not to panic at situations like these. But my mom was the only one panicking. As we went further, my uncle drove slowly, and thankfully we didn't fall off and managed to find the area where we could make a U-turn. It was still on the hill, but the area was wide enough. After making it back to the main road safely, we were all shaken, scared. After a couple hours of driving, it was already night. Nothing at sight, no lights, and it was nothingness. My family didn't follow the GPS this time. They used their memories because they used to be on that road before. We were going uphill again. I had no idea where it was, but all I saw was trees around the car and the quietest sound of the car wheels driving over the gravel. Then at some point we stopped. I was confused, but it appeared that there was no continuation of the road ahead. Everyone in the car was quiet. My mother asked my uncle to check outside. When they opened the car door, it was so cold. The wind was strong and I heard the trees. It was spooky and sent a chill in my spine. My uncle closed the door as he turned on the front lights of the car. There was a line of people, many of them. I don't have any idea what they were doing alone in the woods. It was so weird. After that, I fell asleep from exhaustion. I didn't eat all day because we were stranded in the woods. The next thing, I woke up and we were already on the main road and stopped by a 7-Eleven shop, and they bought hot dogs for my cousins and I to eat. All of us were starving and had no energy. This was an experience where I think I almost died. I'm glad my family and I were safe. Just a reminder, if you want to go somewhere, you can't always trust the GPS or the maps because the routes are outdated. Montour, Ohio is a railroad town boasting a creepy town center with an old railway station surrounded by a rural landscape peppered with brick buildings, sprawling properties with dense woods and cornfields, guarded by sunny farmhouses of varying age and size. A 44S runs one lane each direction. I made this drive regularly to visit my then boyfriend. Familiar with the area, I would usually have music while enjoying the drive and the fresh air. One day in the middle of summer in 2011, I was driving on 44S into Montour, making my usual trip in the mid-afternoon on a beautiful clear day. I passed a quiet area just a few miles from my destination. On the right, houses on 2-3 acre lots with big front yards, longer driveways and attached garages shaded by tall trees, with thick foliage with backyards full of dense woods. On the left across the road, there's a cornfield bordered by a deep grassy drainage culvert stretching several miles long. I see something that looks off up ahead. It's hard to make out, but there's something on the opposite side of the road, where the cornfields are. It's way off and hard to make out, but it's clearly a large brown hairy mass right next to the road. It's too dark in color to be a dead deer. Maybe an escaped cow? No, not that either. Something about this mass on the side of the road is unlike anything I've ever seen, and I just can't figure it out because I keep having to look back at the road. I see it move. Maybe whatever it is isn't roadkill and it's just an animal grazing on the side of the road in the culvert. I rolled my window down to get a better look. I slow down as little as I pass by, and all at once, I realize what I'm seeing. The hairy mass is a dead dog, being eaten by another dog. The biggest dog I've ever seen with the freakiest, emptiest eyes. As I pass by, this thing pulls its face out of the dog carcass it's eating to look up at my car and locks eyes with me. They looked right through me, and it felt like what I can only describe as pure evil. I pass it in my car at about 40 miles per hour. As I start to freak out and roll up my window, I check my mirror for a double take because I absolutely do not believe what I saw. And I see that its head is already back down again, eating and out of view with no other defining features. It was totally unbothered by my car. I slow down, then speed up, then slow down, then speed up again. I want to know what I saw, but I completely freak out. I look for the nearest driveway on my right side, maybe 50-70 yards away, and peel into the driveway to turn around and go back. As I put my car in park, I see that a man is home and is sitting in a lawn chair outside his garage, facing parallel to the road, blissfully unaware of what just up the road behind him, while his 2 Labradors amble around him. He sees me and assumes I'm just using his driveway to turn around, but is unsettled when I drive almost all the way up the driveway, park my car and get out, still freaking out. "Take your dogs inside, you need to get inside your house." I tell him what I saw and he gets up out of his lawn chair to look where I'm pointing, but the trees at the edge of his property block the scene from view and it's just a bit too far. I get back in my car and keep warning him to keep his dogs inside. If our places had been exchanged, I probably would have called the cops on someone who came ripping into my driveway rambling about some wild animal in a panic. I was terrified and full of adrenaline with no regard for ruining this guy's peaceful afternoon. I don't remember how I left it with him, but I got back in my car, backed out onto 44, and headed back north from the way I came to get a better look at this thing, still from the safety of my moving car. I passed where it was and it's gone. I drove back and forth one more time in disbelief at the whole thing. Further back that I thought to be safe, thinking I underestimated the distance between the carcass and the house I stopped at. But there was a hole in the corn where whatever this thing was had clearly drugged the dog it was eating to finish away from the road. I remember sitting stopped on the side of the road after turning around again and heading back south, looking across the road at this hole in the corn that looked far too innocent to do justice to what I had just seen. No one driving by would even notice it. I had my head on a swivel around my car and locked my doors, but something told me I wouldn't see it again and had to get out of there. So I did. When I passed the house again, the man and dogs weren't in the yard anymore, and the garage was closed. Completely rattled, I called my then boyfriend, whose house I was headed to, as I drove away, but if I remember correctly, he didn't answer. When I got there, I was so shaken up and couldn't make sense of what I had seen. This was right after high school, and he still lived with his folks in a cold, creaky farmhouse in Ravenna they had just moved into. And I did not feel safe in that house that night. I brought back all my childhood fears of being afraid of the dark and what was under the bed, like it could be anywhere. I remember this like it was yesterday, and even though I've shared this story with a few friends, I've never written it down. Whatever this was built like a dog, but bigger than any dog I've ever seen. It was very dark brown with dirty hair. I've considered it might have been a black bear with a mange, but even though I only got a quick glimpse, it didn't move like a bear. And the piercing eyes in broad daylight, those were something else. It was canine, not Bigfoot or any other common myth that I'm aware of. I haven't done too much research into what it could be because I think part of me is scared to know what it could be. Black dog, a werewolf, I have no idea. It was big, at least 200 pounds, maybe bigger. The dog it was eating was already quite large. I'm a skeptic. To this day, this is the only unexplainable creepy thing I've ever seen with my 2 eyes. That truly shook me to my core. For months I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it still scares me and disturbs me to think about the story. To start this off, me and my fiance were planning a trip to Utah for about a month. It was kind of an impulsive decision, but she wanted to visit her dad's grave in Delta, Utah. We just returned back from Colorado today. Looking back on the trip, nothing went right and so many weird things happened. On the way to the Airbnb we booked in Manti, we saw many angel numbers. She's very spiritual and I'm a little skeptical, but everything felt normal for the most part. One thing I noticed was how many deer signs I saw, but I hadn't seen a single deer at all. Once we got to the Airbnb, I personally started to feel weird. I know that town is very Mormon, and I've never had any problem with them. I think everyone has a right to their own beliefs, and I respect it. But the way the town felt around the temple was eerie to say the least. While we're in the Airbnb, something felt off. She used her pendulum to try and talk to her dad, but a spirit wouldn't let her get through to anybody. The spirit was Mormon, and she told us to leave and we weren't welcome. Just for context, we're both women and have many tattoos and piercings, and I'm Native American. I felt a gut-sinking feeling at this point, and I asked her to ask if reading a portion of the Mormon Bible would make the spirit more comfortable with us staying there. She said yes, and I read a small bit before we left to get dinner. We decided to get Denny's right outside Manti. When we walked in, the servers kind of stared at us for a good few minutes, until I stared back for a while. That's when they decided to come and give us a table. I had a weird vibe from the people there, but I didn't make a fuss because I'm sure we looked different, especially in a small town coming from Denver. Once we got our food, I almost immediately felt sick after eating. I took only 3 bites before feeling sick. I thought maybe it was because we had been on the road literally all day, but as soon as we got back to driving to the Airbnb, I threw up. We instantly chalked it up to car sickness, until I had my fiancée try a piece of my food, and she began to feel sick almost immediately as well. Yet her food was perfectly fine and we got almost the exact same meal. We decided at that point not to eat out anymore and to use the money for food on groceries, so we left once more. We went to the nearest Walmart, and that experience was mostly normal besides the stares and weird glances we got. As we drove up to the Airbnb, my stomach began to sink again. I swear I saw what looked like a human face inside a bush next to the garage door. I felt a cold sweat, but we decided to go inside just to try and relax. Once we were inside again and getting ready for bed, we saw bugs over and over again. Almost like the cottage was infested with spiders and earwigs. At that point, my fiancé and I decided we had enough of that town, and we booked a hotel room for the night. It was around 11 p.m. when we left, maybe a little earlier. The hotel was about 40 minutes away. The drive was alright at first, until it took us to a dirt road with nothing at all around us. At this point, my mom had called us, worried about us being out late in a foreign state. We stayed on the phone to calm our nerves. As we drove, a series of events played out. First, a black cat ran across the road in front of our car. I was more freaked out about this because of that old saying on top of everything else that had happened in that night. As we drove, there were no street lights or signs, and my phone kept losing service, so we relied on Apple Maps to get us there. A little ways in, I saw a huge cow sitting on the side of the road, just laying there. There wasn't a single other cow around him, or any other animal for that matter. Looking back on it, I didn't see its eyes. The car lights didn't reflect his eyes, and he was really close. Almost seconds after, on the other side of the same road, I saw a giant white figure that almost resembled a horse, but the legs were too skinny. And it had no head, and it moved almost like it glided. Come to find out, my fiancé saw what looked like a man walking to our car as soon as we got on the dirt road, and didn't say anything because she was scared. I didn't say anything about the figure I saw either because I know speaking it out is a bad idea, especially at night, and I didn't want to scare my fiancé. Once we got to the hotel, the gut sinking was gone and we felt better. But I had a horrific nightmare about my mom dying and crawling around the ceiling like something out The Grudge. And when I woke up, my fiancé blamed the road for my dream. I think she was mostly joking, but I'm starting to think she was real. Even as I'm trying to write this out, I'm having trouble with my keyboard lagging or Reddit closing me out of it. I switched to my notes app to write this, but it makes it so much more eerie. This just happened a few days ago, so it's still fresh in my mind, but I wanted to share this because I want to know if anybody else knows what the fuck happened that night, or if that town has something wrong with it.